Hello, I'm Atindra Chaturvedi. In this video, we will look at managing auto-deploy caching modes in vSphere 6.5. We will look at the three auto-deploy caching modes, and then we will look at managing these auto-deploy caching modes using host profiles in vSphere 6.5. So here we are in our web client, logged into a vCenter Server appliance version 6.5, running on ESXi 6.5. Let's look at host profiles from the perspective of auto-deploy. So vSphere auto-deploy, as we know, can be operated in three different modes. One is the stateless mode, where ESXi is deployed directly from the network. And so there's an auto-deploy environment, and then depending on the deploy rules, an ESXi image is actually selected, and then it is loaded into memory during boot of a host. It is stateless in the sense that there's no permanent information that's kept there, and so you have to be sure that your log files and so on are being exported out to a log server. The second mode for auto-deploy is stateless caching. So stateless caching, what it does is when the ESXi image is loaded into memory, a copy of it is also kept in a local cache. And this is really useful from a availability perspective, because if the auto-deploy network goes down, then if you don't have stateless caching, there is no way to boot that ESXi image, because you need to get the auto-deploy network up and running before one is able to reboot server. So this is a very powerful way of making sure that in the event of an emergency where the auto-deploy environment is down, servers can still be rebooted from the local cache. And the third method is called stateful install, which is where when the image is loaded, it is actually loaded right into some kind of a local disk or a SanDisk. And then the boot order is actually different, because instead of booting first from the network, in which case it would get the auto-deploy images, it would boot from your network. It would boot from your storage, so that the image that was installed is then used consistently. So this is basically a way of using auto-deploy to automate kind of permanent installations of ESXi on the ESXi storage. So the key is here, how do you set it up? How do you set up stateless caching, and how do you set up stateless or stateful install? So let's go into host profiles, and let's select one of the profiles here that we've worked with before. So we'll just pick up at random. We'll pick this one up, okay? And we click on configure, and you can see you have the settings option here. We are going to look at the advanced configuration settings, and then we are going to look at the system image cache configuration. I click on that. We have the system image cache up, so I need to edit the host profile there. That's why it was do that. So I get back into my familiar interface, advanced configuration settings, system image cache configuration, and I go there. And here we are. User must explicitly choose the policy option. And here we are. We can enable stateless caching on the host if this host profile with this policy is attached to a host, or using a deployment rule is used. Enable stateful installs. This is where the ESXi image would be installed locally, and then subsequent boots would basically be done from the local disk. You can stateless cache to a USB disk, or you can do a stateful install to a USB disk. Some organizations like to do this as well, but again, you need to be sure that your logging and other files of that nature that are stateful, in the sense they keep track of what's been happening, are actually written to a standard place, like a logging server or a dump server or something of that nature. Okay, so if I enable stateless caching on the host, I do that. I can check to overwrite any VMS volumes installed on the selected disk. So obviously this would be cached on some disk, local disk. So if I want to override any VMS volumes there, I do that. and I ignore any SSD devices, so I make sure that SSD device goes on a spinning disk. We can do that. Or since SSD is so common nowadays, we don't do that. So if with this configuration, this host profile, once it's used and attached and is used in auto deploy, the host to which this host profile is attached is actually going to work on a stateless caching basis, so that when the auto deploy environment is not operational, then everything works still okay, because the boot and the loading of ESXi is then done from the cached image. And I click finish. It validates it, and basically same thing applies if we use the other capabilities. So we are back to the non-editing aspect of it. So here we have just a read-only view, and the options have actually changed. In the previous videos, we covered managing image profiles. We looked at how to manage host profiles, and then we also looked at managing the auto deploy caching modes, so that we have nice, clean, consistent configurations on all our vSphere servers. In the next section, we will look at all the aspects of deploying vSphere 6.5, including upgrading from vSphere 6.x deployments. I look forward to seeing you there.